Hey, it's Beyond the Session, the show where you unlock the secrets therapists keep in their minds. Our friend ChatGPT came up with this intro today. Get to know your therapist in a way no session could ever show you. I think that's appropriate today because we're talking about attachment theory, and you've heard us say the therapeutic alliance is so important when it comes to healing and psychotherapy. We're doing a two-part series, first looking at attachment needs and how that affects our development. And then in part two, we'll look at how to approach therapy when attachment needs have not been met. So, this is some deep psychological stuff we're getting into today. I'm not sure it's even something that you go into often with your clients, Lindsay, but let's dance around it a little bit and try to understand it better.
Sure. Yeah. I think when I read like the official definitions of this attachment theory, that it's familiar enough to me that I've heard it enough like before, or that even clients bring it up with me sometimes. So I don't know that I am as well versed in like maybe the textbook versions of what these are as much as I've used analogies that are very similar to it that I think at least resonate with me in my language a little bit more. And
And obviously, it plays into a psychotherapy setting because you have people coming in that truly have had unmet attachment needs in their early development, for example. I think as I've read and tried to understand the subject a little bit more, a lot of times attachment things, it's happening in early childhood interventions. It's happening in like foster care kind of settings where there's kids who've been detached from their parents. It's happening in, grief situations or in psychological scenarios where there's like a very severe diagnosis going on. And that's where we're trying to understand the attachment more. So a lot of times, we're borrowing aspects of attachment theory, but in the truest sense or in the most hardcore sense, it is those kind of settings where you're seeing a lot more attachment theory being discussed.
and I mean, it makes face value sense though, right? I think most people could understand to a degree that relationships are very important to our mental health, our psyche, or our sense of self, right? And so, uh, whether you have positive, healthy relationships or dysfunctional relationships, a lot of it does get rooted back to childhood, and that also makes sense. It's kind of like the in the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about the Matthew effect, where like most of the NHL players are actually from the first half of the born in the first half of the year because they're bigger, and so they are picked out earlier to get more opportunities, and so therefore they had more time over a lifetime to build out certain skills to become more and more better hockey players. So in the same way, if you are modeled or receiving from your main caregiver a certain kind of relationship and reacting to it in a certain way from a very young age, then that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy of sort where it's this cycle of continuing and becoming more and more in that direction. Not that it's set in stone, because people can be very resilient, come from poor parenting and come back and do really well. But the statistics show otherwise, right? That certain parenting styles statistically, which is an average, show that there are some that are more secure and good and some that are more dysfunctional than others.
Or create more challenges, at least.
Yeah. So like we're talking about longitudinal studies that talk about adaptiveness of adults who were raised a certain way. And so by adaptive, we mean like they are able to do well as an adult, succeed and have good long-term relationship and get good careers. Yeah. So people who come from more positive, better parenting will on an average succeed better. But when we use the word average, it means that there's always going to be outliers, people who do really well and do really poorly, even with the same style of upbringing, right?
Right. There's the people that beat the odds.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I think you're kind of dancing around attachment and even what it is. And a very basic understanding is attachment happens with our parents or parent, early in life, from the beginning of our life, from the moment of conception when we are literally attached in utero to our mother. And then after birth, when we are attached to our caregivers and so dependent. And in that state of absolute dependency, some of it speaks to the way that we are treated or what kind of nurture, what kind of love is given to us.
Yeah. Or even how we perceive it.
Well, I mean, as an infant, it's completely out of your control too,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so I think that's a really important point when we look at attachment, is that there are huge aspects of it that are beyond your control early on in your earliest development. And so then we're going to look at ideal attachment scenarios and less ideal attachment scenarios and how that can affect us as we move forward in our life. So, what are some of the kinds of attachment that happen in early childhood?
Yeah. So I'm going to use my terms for it instead of the textbook terms because I think they'll make more sense.
You're better than the textbook.
Well, no, it's just more colloquial language rather than like, the phrases of like anxious avoidance, and those are the terms that you hear because it's popularized in textbooks, right? But I think I've heard it this way before, and I thought it was, for me at least, an easier way of seeing it. So let's say someone is their parents are one of two things, actually, for me, I think, or maybe one of three things, right? The parenting style may be a very highly relational, maybe inappropriately so. You're my best friend. You're my everything. I'll tell you all my secrets. You need to make adult decisions with me. So that is a type of of a very unhealthy kind of parenting that creates this people pleaser response to it. Right? I need to do everything I can to make you happy. And then you have also the really really opposite, the opposite side, where it's like this strict, cold kind of parenting. It's all about performance. And yeah, I mean, both of those can create two different responses to it. I think you can either become a huge people pleaser. I'll do everything to please that need of yours, whether it's relational or performance, or I would become completely independent from you and cold because I'm not going to get that connection I need from you anyway. So I'm just going to pretend I don't need it. Right. So that's like the two major responses. And the third is it's really just a mixture of the two. And that's the flip flop between the two sides. I'm either going to be the people pleaser, the ice cold person, or very confusing because I don't know when to turn on the other one or the other. So I flip flop between them. And that could come very well from a parenting style that flip flops between the two sides too. And that's usually what it is, right? I mean, I see a lot of parenting reels on Facebook and Instagram right now, and they're kind of making fun of like millennial parenting. And the lady's like running after her children in the store and lying down with him and trying to coax him and talk about his feelings, and it's kind of like poking fun at an extreme end of this very relational type of parenting that has very little expectation. But usually, because that style is so frustrating because the kid is so out of control, then they suddenly snap and they start yelling, or they start using drastic responses to make the child finally listen. And so that becomes this very confusing world for the kid, where they're like, wow, should I do everything in my power to make them like me, or should I pretend I don't need to be liked at all and just become really cold and independent? Right. So that's in a nutshell, I think, attachment theory. The dysfunctions of it would be falling into one of those three categories: the people pleaser, the ice cold person, or the flip flopper. And of course, then you have the fourth style, which would be a proper attachment and secure attachment, which builds up this good self esteem, has proper boundaries in relationships, but then also knows how to be vulnerable and connect with someone.
Mm-hmm. And all that, like you were saying, is a response to parenting style. And in some cases, I mean, I talked about foster homes. In some cases, there has been a detachment from birth or from early years,
Yeah.
from, birth parents, or even, being raised by a single parent. And how can that affect a child's development or their attachment?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the same responses, right? Like this doesn't even have to be about the parenting. It could be very well like I know people who have more insecure types of attachment because they moved around a lot. So they at least had the secure attachment to their parents, which was very good for them, but almost too much in some ways. It's like very, very attached to their parents because they felt insecure about their relationships with friends, because it was like, oh, I'll see them for a few years, then I won't see them anymore. So why would I allow myself to be too vulnerable with anybody?
Yeah.
Right? Because they're going to disappear from my life anyway. So that would be the avoidant type of insecure attachment.
Yeah. Or else overdoing it when they do make friends, right? Being
Yeah.
overbearing almost,
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
they so deeply want and crave
Yeah.
friendship. Like I've seen that happen with kids who haven't had a lot of social exposure, and they want to please people
Yeah.
so badly that even if the other child is treating them poorly,
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
continue to pursue and not set proper boundaries.
Yeah. And it would just, it's just like, it's such a deep thing because you've learned it for so long and you've seen the pattern for so long, especially when it comes to a parent, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes you have adult children who are struggling with that with their parent. They're like, I recognize, I can see how I am completely trying to please them. And I hate that. And so they have to do the flip flop a little bit. Sometimes they become colder. So, like, navigating how to have a healthy adult relationship with their parents becomes really difficult, especially if their parents are still acting that way. It's a hard thing. So, it really draws into light, I hope, two perspectives on parenting. Is that on one hand, it is a heavy responsibility because you do have a lot of influence on how a child can turn out. But on the other side, they have their whole own lives to figure out. Like, you can't engineer their lives. So either of those stances where I am neglectful of the influence I have with them or too overbearing on my influence on them can potentially harm them. Now, I think, and I say this kind of jokingly, that no matter what you do, you're gonna mess up your kids' lives. They're gonna blame you one way or another. Like whatever. The best parents in the world will have kids complaining about something about their childhood.
Yes.
So do the best you can, and just trust that they'll have to figure out. And it's not your responsibility to figure out everything in their lives.
I want you to expand for me a little bit. What are some signs that a person's early attachment needs might not have been met?
Well, I mean, it depends on which style we're talking about, right? Are we talking about the ice cold person, or are we talking about the people pleaser person, or the confused one? Well, and that's exactly how it would play out behaviorally, I suppose. You will have some people who don't have the secure attachment. They're going to long for a good relationship. And the moment they get into one, they would make things happen so that they can get out of it.
Yeah.
Because they feel, I'm scared. When is the other shoe going to drop?
Or maybe they feel they've never had a secure attachment before, so they just don't even know how to navigate it.
Sure. Well, it's uncomfortable. Like, oh, this person actually knows me. Man, this happens in therapy. I have people who, things are going pretty well in therapy, and then they're like, well, I'm disappearing because this is too close to home now.
Yeah.
Right. This is too scary for someone to know me that well.
Or you have people who are consistently seeking out relationships, like romantic relationships, with people that they already know are not going to work for them, whether they're unavailable or they have traits that they know they don't align with.
Yeah.
So they kind of tease themselves with the idea of being interested in someone and maybe even get infatuated with that idea. But then they know in reality it can never work, and that it in some way comforts them. It's like a way of protecting themselves from actually attaching to someone.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why that people call these like daddy issues or mommy issues. It's because a lot of it really does come back from that. A lot of times it's abandoning fathers, right? Fathers that disappear from their lives. Or it's overbearing moms, right? Moms who are way over involved themselves with you. Of course, it can go the other way around too.
Yeah.
Right? That's just a more general trend, which then exactly that causes someone to want to jump from one relationship to another because they want to be liked, but they don't want to be seen completely.
Is that something that we control or even notice ourselves doing?
I think, the general sentiment I hear from people is that not that they don't have any self-awareness, right? It's that they're like, I can see that I'm doing this, but I can't help myself. It just happens.
Yeah.
It's like an autopilot.
Unintentional. Interesting. Yeah. So then I guess our early attachment experiences, it's not just something we can write off when we become adults. Like, those actually shape how we form friendships, how we relate to our significant other, or how we distance ourselves from even wanting a significant other.
Yeah, it's a very real issue. Well, maybe it's because I'm in this world and I see it so much. The people with insecure attachments are exactly that. They're insecure. They're anxious. There's this underlying anxiety of when's the shoe gonna drop, or the depression of I must not be lovely. I must not be lovable.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't my parent leave me if I'm lovable? Or why were they so emotionally unavailable to me?
How does our brain process and store those attachment experiences even before we can remember them?
I don't know. I mean, I would just, if I want to poke at a guess at it, right? It's the same real. I mean, it's the same thing for all neuroscience. It's just creating pathways. It's like addictions, right? Like you get the dopamine rush from feeling liked, then I'm gonna keep looking for that. So you can look at it from that lens. It's like an addictive behavior in some ways. It's like sugar, right? Versus like healthy food. Surface level fake relationships can give you all the sugar you need to give you all the hits, but then it's really healthy foods that's gonna actually sustain you. But I'm avoidant of it because I don't know what it is, don't know how to have it, and I'm scared of it because it's very uncomfortable. So yeah, I think that's one way where your brain can be shaped to reject healthy attachment and look for the thrill of unhealthy relationships.
We've talked before about the prefrontal cortex and how in healthy development that's happening in a situation where there's safety, where there's a sense of being loved, nurtured, and cared for. And, in abusive situations, or I would imagine also in situations where there's a distancing from your parent, that would affect the way that your brain is actually developing from your childhood.
Mm.
So then that creates challenges, obviously, later in life, not impossible to overcome. And like our brains are very capable of rewiring and adapting. And, it's remarkable the way that people are able to kind of overcome those kind of barriers in their life.
Yeah.
But it does pose certain challenges for people.
Yeah. Well, you hear the stories all the time. Somebody came into my life and showed me real care. That's why there's always the coach or the teacher or the big brother, big sister who came along, and then it changed everything for me. Or I walked into this friend's family and they accepted me as their own.
Yeah.
And then that completely changed me. Yeah. So absolutely, like you can adapt. Like your brain can change and see the goodness of secure relationship and help you grow in that area.
Yeah. No, and you're right. We've seen so many stories, of acquaintances or friends that have had difficult upbringing or, detachment from their parent in some way. And yet they had that figure in their life, that mentor, that coach, like you were saying, that family friend who really just took them under their wing. Or, I mean, in some cases, we have friends who have adopted children and they're really thriving and flourishing in that care. So there's always hope and there's always, those stories where those needs are then being met, that attachment can be reformed and there's an opportunity for growth and healthy development there.
Right. And then there's the spiritual ones too, right? The ones that are like, wow, you know what? I think I believe that God loves me. So my fundamental core has shifted to be of one who is in the recipient end of unconditional love, and that helped me feel secure and settled. And so I'm changing because of that. We heard lots of stories of that before too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that can be in cases where, someone's grown up with their parents and still didn't feel worthy of love for some reason. And that was really deep in their story and in their perception of themselves. And so they needed that external sense of, I am loved unconditionally. And I guess we share all that to say that there is hope for people that are feeling like their attachment needs were not met or that somehow they're messed up by their past or by their family. There is always hope. And there have been people that have walked through similar stories who have come out on the other side thriving. And I think attachment also speaks to the fact that we start out as part of our family, but then as we grow and develop, our attachment needs change. When we're teenagers, we really deeply crave friendship for the first time and care so much about how our friends perceive us and how we relate to them. Later in life, it might be a spouse that we really connect with. So there's different areas of attachment. I mean, our spouse can't become our parent, but being in a healthy relationship can help to restore that sense of balance in our psyche or that sense of safety.
I think it's funny, people who do studies on happiness, right, or longevity or health always point back to the importance of connection and community. And like some of the happiest people in the world, they just have this connection to their community in the sense that they have different people from different generations connected to them. So they have this richness to their connections
Yeah.
that makes them really whole. And I think that it's one of the sad commentaries on our Western life right now is that it has become. I've heard before that we're now entering into Gen Z being the loneliest generation of all time, and it's because we have this ecosystem of quick reels and having dialogue only with people online and in my own generation, that is maybe a part of that problem, right?
Hmm. Yeah, we're like connecting without attaching.
Yeah. So it's very challenging because how do you create a mini counterculture in your own circle to combat that when everyone else is fighting with the same thing? But I think it really is a form of an antidote, though, for a lot of our mental health stuff going on now, is to be able to actively invite people over to my house and invite myself to their houses and talk about real things and form friendships and bonds, not in inappropriate ways, right? But in ways that have both proper boundaries and proper connection with a crew of people. And sometimes even better if they are of different ranges of age
Mm-hmm.
or areas of life. So that I have this richness to me. You know, we hear this often with couples, right? Where one side's like, yeah, you know, you've lost all your friends after we got married, and I'm worried for you. I want you to have your friends so that, because I can't be the world to you.
Right.
It's too heavy for one person to bear.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's a possible antidote to the, even if you had insecure attachments in early life, is that when I build good secure attachments now, that does heal.
Mm-hmm. And I think attachment theory speaks to the fact that we're not just our individual self. We're dependent on other people.
Yeah.
We're dependent from the time we were born all the way through our life
Yeah.
on other people, the nurture and care of other people, the shared experiences, the shared meaning making, just doing life together, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that everybody needs and craves to some degree.
Yeah, I think it's in our biology, right? Like, you know, there's all those documentaries of killer whales and how they're actually completely social beings. And that's why when they're isolated in a tank, they go feral. Like they, well, I mean, yeah, I guess they're wild animals to begin with, right?
They go wild.
But they snap and then they drag the, you know, trainer into the water and kill them, right? You hear that all the time, and it's because they're not doing what they're made for, which is to be in the wilderness and roaming around, but also having that social aspect of their lives, right? I mean, you hear about this with the rats and addictions. You know, the rat paradise gets are the ones that lose their addictions. The ones who don't have it maintain it. So it is with humans. We are, for better or worse, social beings, which is scary because people are messy and relationships add drama to our lives when we're looking for less drama sometimes. And yet it is the lifeblood of what it means to be a human. So, what a dilemma.
It is a dilemma because even though we deeply need, want, crave relationships and attachment with people, people are also messy and broken and they have their own pain and hurt and their own stuff that they're going through, right? And we kind of have to meet them with that and with our own messiness and, you know, try and work out some kind of an attachment together. We've been highlighting what it looks like when our attachment needs have not been met. And we're going to come back in the next episode and look at how we take this into the therapy room and deal with present attachment. What if you're struggling to attach with people based on your past experiences? And how can we unpack that in therapy and try and build bridges? We hope you'll come back and join us. This is Beyond the Session, brought to you by Reset Counseling and Psychotherapy in Barrie. And if you have any questions, email us at resetbarrie@gmail.com. And we'll see you next time.